We went to see the movie Obsession. I'm still trying to process why.
I wonder how much horror movies are actually like fantasies of what people want. I mean, I think the idea of a woman who's really crazy about you sounds great. Not what
Not
in
if
the
she's
movie.
standing in place waiting for you to come home from work and, like, peeing on the floor because she can't move from that spot. I mean, unless that's your thing.
Has incel just replaced loser as just a catch-all kind of insult of like any guy who's not doing well and romantically? We used to just call him a loser or a virgin or pathetic, and now we just say incel.
Are men like too anxious about asking women out, and most of the time the verdict is yes, they need to be less anxious about it?
It's hard though. What if you're like ask someone to marry you and they're like, okay, but only as friends?
Yeah, let's be friends marriage.
Might be better. Who knows? All right, we're back with the Open Therapy Podcast. I'm Megan Daum. I am with Rob Henderson and Dr. Andrew Hartz. Excuse me, Dr. Rob K. Henderson and Dr. Andrew Hartz. I am not a doctor. I'm not Dr. Jill Biden, but I hope to be one. All right. Well, we are going to talk about an assignment that we had. We went to see the movie Obsession. I'm still trying to process why we did this, but I'm hoping by the end of this conversation that will become apparent.
You didn't like the film, Megan?
It's not the worst movie I ever saw. Actually, I have to say it was good for me. I saw it in the theater. I went to the theater. I paid the money. I drove there. I parked. I walked into the theater. I did all the things that you do when you go to a movie that we used to do, and it used to be so much simpler for some reason.
What made it more complicated this time?
I don't know. Just I feel like the whole process.
30 minutes of previews.
Okay.
Yeah, and Andrew, Andrew and I were
30.
talking, but you should never get there on time. You should be fashionably late to a movie.
Yeah.
As if it were
I've
a
learned
party.
that lesson. Yeah, 20 minutes, 30 minutes late,
45
on time.
Yeah. Just like I couldn't believe. Yeah.
All right.
I think they're aware we don't see ads anymore anywhere else, or we can skip them everywhere else, but you are coerced into watching them.
And I immediately went out and bought all of the stuff that they were advertising because that's how effective it is, of course. All right. Well, this is this movie is all the rage. It's a supernatural psychological horror film. It is, I guess, the quote unquote sleeper hit of the season. Young director named Curry Barker, produced by Blumhouse, which is a big horror movie house. They make tons of movies. I actually went to college with Jason Blum, the founder of Blumhouse. That's how old I am. But this movie was made for under $1 million, which is like pennies in
under
movie terms.
1 million.
Mm-hmm. And it's already grossed more than almost 150 million. It's already grossed.
Wow.
In the last, not even open a month. So, So, okay. Why? I don't know whose idea this was, but so there's some like, obviously it's a psychological horror film and this is a psychology podcast. So, it would make sense that we would discuss it, but, I don't know. Does one of you want to give this synopsis without giving too much away? Although we're probably going to have to give some stuff away. Which of you wants to do the honors?
I think Rob should do the honors.
Okay.
And summarize. Yeah. And I did think a lot about what was happening. And I do think there's like, it's speaking to people because it's hitting on cultural themes and things that are very relevant and on people's minds. So I did see that for sure.
Yeah, and I thought, it was unexpectedly well done. I always have sort of basement tier expectations for any horror film, but this one, it was more sophisticated than I expected. But okay, so obviously there are going to be spoilers here. So the general shape of the story, this guy Baron, nicknamed Bear, he believes himself to be in love with this woman Nikki, who's a part of his larger social friend group. So Bear and Nikki, part of this social group, he has a crush on her, and he early in the film, he's on the phone with her and she tells him she lost a necklace, and he, very gallantly goes to this kind of like woo-woo horror store.
She
this
lost a
little kind of
crystal necklace. A crystal necklace, important detail,
necklace.
which is why he went into this kind of crystal, like head shop, magic mushroom kind of shop to buy
Yeah,
the
right.
necklace. Yes, yeah.
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 So he goes into the store initially planning to get her something, and he doesn't buy a necklace. He instead gets a one-wish willow, this kind of gimmicky, kind of trinket that you see in these kinds of stores where you break this piece of willow and make a wish and it'll come true. And so he goes out with Nikki, and then he later drops her at home, and she directly asks him, would you, do you like me? Do you want to ask me out? Something like that. And he declines, but then afterwards he's beating himself up in the car by himself and says he wishes Nikki was, loved him more than anything in the world, breaks the stick. And, it's a horror film, so magic exists. She falls madly in love with him, kind of terrifyingly in love with him. And then from there, it becomes kind of this story of be careful what you wish for. Interesting things ensue, which we can discuss about how she, becomes very sort of violent and manipulative towards him. The friends in their friend group get spooked because they're wondering how it is that suddenly Nikki is so crazy about Bear. And there are, sort of creepy scenes of threats and self-harm, and a lot of these, a lot of this stuff has been turned into memes. There's one scene where Bear, he says he's going to go out and meet some of his friends, and then Nikki in response has this very sort of sad face, and then the image of that sad face of Nikki has gone viral online, or people making jokes about how you look when someone tells you X, or like whatever. And then, so eventually, he calls the hotline on the One Wish Willow and asks, like, how do I reverse the wish? And they say, you really can't. This is going to be stuck with you as long as you live. And so, from there, you can kind of guess that he ultimately gets so freaked out over what's happening. He feels some guilt over what he's done to Nikki, and eventually ends his own life. And that's kind of the end of the story. But Nikki comes back, the real Nikki. And I find that part interesting, too, is that some part of the real Nikki was still trapped within the possessed Nikki, and every once in a while manages to resurface within her own body. I thought there were some kind of Freudian elements there, which Andrew might have thoughts about. But that's kind of the general outline of the story. And I also thought, I wrote this review for the Times of London, and found Bear's character more interesting the longer I watched this story, that he wishes for her to love him, Nikki, and yet she really, it's the possessed Nikki who loves him, and he senses that there is someone else underneath who doesn't love him, and he needs her to love him as well in order for him to love her back. So anyway, that's kind of the general story.
That's
okay.
I majored in religious studies in undergrad, and I did take a class on magic, and a lot of actual magic in antiquity was very much this way. The main way that people would do magic is they'd get these lead tablets, and they'd carve in what they wanted to have happen, and they'd fold it in half and put a spike through it and bury it. The reason we know that people were doing this all the time is whenever archaeologists do digs, they find a ton of these magic tablets. And it was, so you get to know like what people are wishing for and what people are like wanting to do magic for. And wanting people to fall in love with you is one of like the big ones. It was like, I think probably the biggest one, wanting money, sometimes curing an illness, and like winning at chariot racing. Those were kind of like the big
Is that
ones.
a euphemism?
But it's interesting that there's something about like the way people would do magic, like tying a knot or something, that has this kind of like psychological pull to it. But it's very much like you make a wish and you snap the thing, and it's
so this is like wishes for money, for health, for love, for glory in the case of the chariot race. So, really,
Right.
people haven't changed all that much since the ancient times.
And it was
No.
illegal. And magic in ancient Rome and Greek was a crime. It was illegal. And they just had a very different sense of these things. It's interesting because, like, even when you go back to, like, thinking about Jesus, and he is reported to have done all these miracles, and the critiques of him were not, oh, he didn't really do miracles, it's fake. There were, he used magic. It wasn't a real miracle, it's witchcraft or something. So that's really where the criticisms look like they just lived in a world where, and I think for most of human history, we lived in a world where magic was real. And I think that archetype is very deeply psychologically rooted. Even if you don't believe in it, there's something very human about it. And it's pretty general cross-cultural, like magic and witchcraft are pretty like global, universal human things.
Okay. So it's part of the reason that we're talking about this, and I presume part of the reason you were assigned this film review, Rob, is because there is a pretty heavy social psychology overlay here, and just in terms of discussions about the mating crisis and people not being able to get together and incels. I have heard Bear's character referred to as an incel, and I found that a little surprising because that wasn't my read on him. So I'm curious what you guys think of this. And we should also say these are young, these people, they're in their early 20s, I guess. I mean, these are young kids. The film also had this strange timeless quality to it, just aesthetically. It was set in the present day, ostensibly, because they have cell phones and they're texting each other a little bit, but it feels very 90s or even maybe 80s. Like there's something about the kind of production design and the overall vibe that does not feel terribly contemporary. I mean, they're working at a music store. They're very much an embodied friend group. They do things together. They go to trivia night. It doesn't have this like, no, it doesn't have this like digital dystopia feel to it. So the idea that this kid who's just sort of awkward and can't bring himself to ask out this girl is an incel struck me as a little bit off. So what do you guys make of that?
That's interesting because if you like, I agree with you that generally this same film could have been made in 1999, and if that same type of guy existed in a film in 1999, I mean the term incel didn't exist, but I don't think people would have thought of him as this. Well, I don't know. Like, has incel just replaced loser as just a catch-all kind of insult
Well,
of like
but
any
incel
guy
has,
who's not doing well and romantically? We used to just call him a loser or a virgin or pathetic, and
or
now we just say
like
incel.
a nerd. I mean, incel
Yeah.
has this kind of like ideological connotation, and
Yeah.
they're organized and they hate women and they're gonna
There's like a
commit
political valence
mass
to
attacks.
it.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
I don't know. I mean, he didn't actually. I know, maybe. I mean, he certainly he was not like bad looking. I know incels, a lot of incels are actually perfectly good looking, but they just don't see themselves that way. I
They
mean,
made him
Bear.
uglier for the film. I've seen him in interviews, like, doing the media rounds, and he's better looking in the interviews than he is in the film. So they
Well,
had to
I
make him
mean,
slightly less attractive.
he's a movie
Whereas,
actor.
yeah,
Okay. So like
yeah,
obviously no one's going to be terribly unattractive. This is a movie.
yeah.
But
Mhm.
he lives, I think that he lives in his grandmother's house that I guess
Mhm.
she died and he inherited the house. So he's not, it's okay. He doesn't have his
Yeah.
own place, but he does live on his own. He doesn't live in anybody's basement. He has a job, he has a car, he goes to work. I don't know. Like none of them struck
Yeah.
me as like as pathetic or sort of fitting into any of these paradigms. So it just seemed to me that he was painfully shy and paralyzed when it came to asking out this particular girl.
Mm.
So anyway,
Yeah. You can't
that's
just be you can't just be shy anymore. You can't just be, romantically frustrated or just, yeah, just a loser. You have to, we have to tag these labels on of incel now. But yeah, I think you're like, I don't, I'm thinking about like, oh, would he, like, did Bear come across as someone who hates women or has some kind of a
no.
political orientation around how society
Uh,
should be organized romantically or whatever? I didn't get that from him at all. I never even thought to call him an incel, but then later I did see a lot of the commentary. Oh, Bear is an incel. And that's just the term that people reach for because it's kind of the pattern matching.
Okay. No, I mean, I didn't think, I mean, if anything, when she was possessed, and we can get more into this, but he was very concerned about consent all the time. Like when she first becomes sort of under this spell and she comes on to him and they have this sexual encounter, then he's really worried later that somehow it wasn't really her, so she didn't consent. I mean, it's very contemporary in that sense, but I did not. No, I thought this was like a healthy friend group. There was another girl in the group who had a crush on him, so he's not supposed to be sexually undesirable. It just seemed to me like this was just he just couldn't get out of his own head when it came to this particular girl.
I definitely one thing I do think is like that I hear a lot, this comes up all the time, is like, are men like too anxious about asking women out, and most of the time the verdict is yes, they need to be less anxious about it, but it is hard. I think like sometimes when I hear like women talk, and I think there's also something about, for whatever reason, maybe it's because it's about your attractiveness and it's about romantic relationships, it's like very emotionally charged, and I think it is fairly anxiety producing. And I think like sometimes I feel like maybe women don't fully appreciate how hard it is. Like the idea of especially walking up to a total stranger and being like strutting over there and then saying like, hey, you like, what are you doing? And like, I think there is this like having like a good opener and starting a conversation, and like your miss rate is going to be really high.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think, of course, there are those situations where she wants that and is maybe trying to signal it, but it is actually hard. And I think maybe women might not fully realize the challenges always involved in doing that.
There was a memoir, Nora Vincent wrote this memoir, Self-Made Man, about 10 years ago. Yeah, you guys are familiar.
I knew her. I knew Nora, actually.
Oh, right. Did you know her sort of pre and post?
Well, actually, I interviewed her. I interviewed her when that book came out. I mean, this is fascinating. Fascinating character. Actually, Sarah Hayter and I, when we were doing Special Place in Hell podcast, we did a whole episode about Nora Vincent. But I'm really curious what you think about this book, because this was before like the sort of queer movement. I mean, this is a butch lesbian who, I think this book was like probably...
it would have been received very differently today, I think. So the part that I was going to bring up is that
story.
So very briefly, Nora Vincent. She was she's a woman, biological female who I guess for the purposes of this book, Self-Made Man, she cut her hair and underwent voice coaching and lifted weights and did all these things to just sort of masculinize her presentation, and then went undercover for I think a year as a man and wrote about her experiences of like what men are really like. And some of my favorite parts of this book are when she goes out with some guys from work. She works in an office job and they all go out for drinks. It's happy hour or something. And she decides to go ask as a man, because she's a lesbian. So she had asked women out as a woman. Now she's asking women out as a man, and she's finding the experience to be a lot more anxiety inducing. And she felt pathetic and felt, all the sort of shame and anxiety and, getting rejected more often than not. And there were some interesting things there too about how initially when she would approach some women, she would be the man. I think her name was Ned as a man.
Yeah.
So Nora became Ned, and they would blow him off, and then Ned would say, "Well, I'm actually a woman," and kind of explain what she was really doing. And then these women became very interested.
Well, that's cheating.
And very friendly.
You guys don't have that advantage. Yeah. This book came out in like 2006.
Yes.
So,
And
long
so, I
ago.
just found like to see like, oh, like this is one of the rare occasions where a woman can accurately understand and then convey like this. And she would see her male colleagues go up to women and get shot down, and they'd come back with their tail between their legs, like feeling all sad and pathetic. And it's to your point, Andrew, that it's never easy.
I get asked by
believe it's
patients
easier than it is.
Yeah, and I get asked by patients like how to do it, or I'm asked by like how do you, and it's like going up cold to someone you don't know is really hard. Like I think he's in a different situation. This is a long-term friend, and you'd think you could like say, hey, we should like hang out together, and I don't know, see if it wins. It's a lot easier if it's somebody that you know. I think, but to go up cold to someone you don't know, I think is really hard.
And that's how often is that even done? I mean, I guess it was done more in the past, but I feel like that almost never happens now. Or there's a certain kind of man that's going to do that and who sees it as a numbers game, literally. Like if I ask out 20 women on the street today, one of them, chances are, will say yes. And so that's why I'm going to do it. I just, I don't know.
You kind of, and I think partly like if you are a little bit flustered, that kind of makes it a cuter interaction. Like I think like you don't want to be like I think if you're too confident and slick about it, I think you're going to get a lot more no's.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
so it's like it's kind of like you can't be too confident, but you have to be confident enough, and you can't be too insecure, but you have to be insecure enough, and then it's like how many if you're walking up to a stranger, how many of them are in relationships or not
Right.
looking or like
No,
so
you
it's
know,
just like
yeah.
it's really it's hard, and then you're gonna start a conversation with someone you know nothing about out cold that's obviously romantic, and it is I think it's way underestimated how hard that is, and I think even like women know when they want to be asked out and it's not always obvious, and there are women also who will kind of like um seem like they're interested and they just want to get the attention and they actually
Yeah.
don't, you know, so it's like there's all this, so I think it's just it can be like a big ego hit. I do think like sex and romantic feelings are very intimate and they hit harder than other forms of like applying for a job and
Of
not getting it.
course.
So like I think it's not unreasonable for men to want to like preserve their self-esteem a little bit and not do that when there is a high degree of risk.
Well, one of the dynamics in this movie was the friend zone dynamic, right? So Bear and Nikki are friends. I mean, and pretty close. I mean, they're close confidants. I mean, she calls him. They call each other, and I don't know. You know, we don't know how long exactly they've been friends, but it seems like quite a while, like period of years. So part of the message was sort of like what the question: once you're in the friend zone, can you never get out of it? And I wonder what you guys think of that, because obviously, like, there's many romantic comedies that, you know, When Harry Met Sally, like, they're friends and like they actually do successfully get out of the friend zone. But I wonder if that is the exception more than the rule.
Yeah, I had this conversation about obsession with William Costello, who's a PhD student in evolutionary psychology. And I asked him about kind of the research around, because he studies mating, and how many relationships start out as friends first. And he cited some recent studies showing something like 60% of people begin as friends first, and before they enter a romantic relationship. And I think that this too is why obsession feels kind of timeless, because that used to be a more common trope in films of like, oh, the kind of hapless guy who really likes his hot female friend and she's not really interested, and you know eventually they end up together. I mean, this is like kind of the horror version of that, but I don't think we really see that as much anymore. And but yeah, I think like that is a more common thing than we'd like to believe. We almost went kind of full circle where that used to be a common theme in films and maybe in real life as well. And then for a time, I think with the rise of like the kind of cold approach pickup artist, red pill stuff, it's like, oh, if you get friend zoned, you're locked in forever. She's never gonna like
Mm-hmm.
you, and all the dating apps and everything. And then I
Right.
think now more people are starting to realize like, oh, you know, meeting people through social circles and friends and that kind of thing is you know, a better way to meet people.
But how do you define that? 60% are friends first, but does that just mean like you happen to meet this person organically and you have a friendly conversation with them? I mean, that's usually there's like some, you know, mutual interest, like romantic interest, at least kind of a spark that would,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I would
Yeah.
think of like a friend zoning to me is sort of like, wow, I'm friends with this guy and we have, there has been no romantic element for, you know, a
Sometimes guys
notable
friend
period of
zone.
time.
Yeah. Some guys friend zone themselves in a way, where they're yeah, almost like the bear situation where they're so cowardly. As I was watching Obsession, I thought about a friend I had when I was at Cambridge in grad school, and this guy, he would have these study sessions with his classmate, a young woman who he really liked, and they would study almost every day for a year. And then by the end of the year, she was about to graduate. I think he had anyway. They were both about to graduate, I think. Anyway, final day, they're about to graduate, and he asks her out on a date when they're about to go their separate ways. I think she had got a postdoc off in another country, and he had, got a job in tech, and they were about to and she gets mad at him. She says, like, we've been hanging out every day for a year, and I've wanted you to ask me out this entire time, and you wait until now to do this. But she agrees, so they go on a date. And obviously, like, by this point, they actually obviously like each other because they spent every day together for a year. And then this is the first time where it's, expressed that this is a romantic thing now. And then they just decide we're in a relationship now. And now they're married, and they're, it's a happily ever after story. But he waited until the final moment. And he almost didn't, he told me this. He said, I almost didn't ask, but I'm like, you know what? Even if she says no, we're going to go our separate ways, and I'll be able to live this down. But that's how close these things can be. And so that was, very much a friend's first thing. But the entire time he was, holding a torch for her.
Yeah. Well, it could have gone really wrong if she had said no, because they do have this like study relationship. So that would have been
I don't know if it would
awkward.
have.
But
I mean, I think they would have been okay. And it also depends on how you ask too, I guess.
Right.
I mean,
Wait. So
he was
that's
very-
it. Have you ever stayed friends with someone where you or she asked each other out and then it survived that? I don't think
have.
I've ever.
Yeah.
You have? Okay.
yeah, I've
Yeah,
had
yeah,
I've
yeah.
had
Wow.
guys I'm friends with make it pretty clear. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not like we stayed friends forever and ever and ever, but like for quite a long time. Yeah, it's a little bit.
Mm.
Yeah, and actually,
Yeah.
I've had, you sort of acknowledge it. It's like, oh yeah, that was awkward, but we got through that, and we're still friends. I mean, maybe
But they're
they're
still
like
attracted to you.
seething
It's-
inside. Yeah, but
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's possible. It is like, a little weirder after. I mean, I've personally had like I don't know. I think like all the like the red pill manosphere stuff of like don't get trapped in the friend zone is so silly. I mean, like yes, there was a girl in high school who I asked, I think, to homecoming or one of those like high school dances, and she said, yeah, as long as we go as friends. And I was like, all right, fine. And then we stayed friends after, and like I still liked her, but we remained friends throughout the rest of school. And then later, when I was 20 or 21, I asked this girl out, and she said as friends, but then we ended up dating. It was like our first date was as friends, but then I asked her like, hey, like I actually really enjoyed this. Do you want to like get dinner and like have a real date? And she said, yeah. And then we became, entered a relationship. So I think the friends thing is, it's often just a way to lower the stakes and let people just kind of relaxed around each other a little bit. We don't have to be on our A game. We don't have to, we're not auditioning for marriage. We're just sort of feeling each other out. And, I think that, to me, it makes sense that so many relationships would start that way as kind of, let's call it friends first, and then sort of see where things go.
it's hard though. What if you're like ask someone to marry you and they're like, okay, but only as friends?
Yeah, let's be friends marriage.
Might be better. Who knows? Take the pressure off.
But I do
Yeah.
think like there is something like I guess partly like what I was thinking about maybe with that age. I don't know what age Bear was supposed to be, but like I do remember like I was particularly clueless in my early 20s about every aspect of dating and relationships, and I needed my early partners to teach me how to do everything. And I really just needed to be told how to do all the things. And I remember being like, you've got to get flowers and stuff. Sometimes I was like, oh, okay, well, interesting. It never occurred to me that I needed to do that. And then it's like, no, that's something you have to do. And then this other thing, you got to make sure that we go on dates sometimes. And this is what you do. And this is it. I just like it. I think men, especially young men, they have to be taught somehow, and it's usually by a woman, usually I think by their first partner, this is what you do. And they're really they want to learn. I think often they don't know, they know they don't know what to do, and they're not comfortable with it, and you just have to have like an experience to figure out, okay, this is how a relationship emerges, this is what it feels like, and this is the type of stuff you do. But I think if you haven't had an experience like that, it's incredibly daunting.
The flowers thing. I mean, I flowers are okay, but can I just say candy? I never understood that. Like, oh, get her flowers and candy. Really?
Isn't that a Valentine's thing?
Yeah,
Or
but even
why
that,
not?
it's like, what? Like, that just seems weird. And flowers, I mean, look, I personally love flowers. I have flowers on my house, and I have particular flowers that I like. But I don't know, like bringing somebody flowers like on a date, and then you have to carry them around
Oh, well,
after,
that's
and then what if you try to kiss them and they're like holding this thing of flowers and it's totally awkward, and then you have to like and not that this hasn't happened to me personally, but I have some very specific details here. Then it's like you got to put the flowers on the ground, and then you're like making out, and then he's like, "Why did you put my flowers on the ground?"
I don't know
It's
about getting
a
them on a
mess.
date, but like bringing flowers in other contexts might work, or it's like having flowers sent to the office or something.
Oh, having the
Yeah.
flowers sent is great.
Yeah.
It's
Mm.
to the office because, and then also everyone in the office can see
But
that.
the thing that's confusing for that as a guy is like, I mean, I guess I think flowers are great, but I've never been upset that I wasn't sent flowers. I don't really like.
I've never been
wasn't like,
upset
how come
either. I've never been expecting them.
Oh.
No. Yeah.
But there's like and like and also norms are like dating norms are like so they're constantly changing because of technology, and it's like somebody just has to like I don't know, it's weird how there's no way the young guys are going to know what to do if nobody tells them. And I think there's something about, I think women want the men to know but don't want to tell them or something. I don't.
And you don't
So-
think their fathers
Oh, yeah.
can tell them, or their mothers, or
They'll
somebody?
tell them how it was done 40 years ago or
Oh.
something, and it won't matter. I mean, but or if they have good parents who know how to do it and are engaged, which I don't know how often that happens either. But like they could potentially having a good male mentor who could teach you those things. Maybe that
Yeah.
would be good. But
Yeah.
But people are looking online, and what are they? They're finding Andrew Tate or whatever. And
Yeah, I should
like,
neg her.
yeah,
negging.
not
Yeah.
great advice.
But for this movie, again, like I wasn't even really sure that Nikki wouldn't have liked him. Like, this is the thing I didn't understand, because I feel like, do we know for sure that she was not interested in him?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we know for sure, but I think the signs were pointing probably not. Early on when they're at the bar, all together, and I think was this a trivia night scene or something? But
Mhm.
they're all at the bar together, and they go off. Nikki and Bear go off to the bar to get a drink or drinks for everyone, and the Bear offers to pay, and Nikki says, "Oh no, like don't do that." And then so declining his offer to pay for a drink, which is like kind of
Okay.
an easy way to sort of communicate. They're both sort of communicating. So I think Bear was saying, let me buy this, as a sort of sub-communicating, like, hey, I like you enough to pay for your drink. And then if she had accepted, then she could have sub-communicated, like, I like you enough to let you buy me a drink. But she declines, and then she also calls the male bartender babe, which I missed. But when I mentioned I spoke with William, he pointed this out to me, that she called him babe. And if you call another guy babe in front of the guy who you suspect likes you, you're probably trying to tell him like, hey, we're friends only. But then there was that weird moment later when he drops her off, and she's like, hey, do you like me?
Right.
Which I think that if the answer were no, I don't know how, it's an odd thing to do. If you expect the answer to be no, then why would you ask that?
Oh, it's the last
Um,
thing you would ask. I think that's why
yeah.
I was confused, because
Yeah.
if she's friend zoned him and she does not want to have this encounter, she is no way is she going to ask that question. She's just going to like brush it off or try to get out, just say
Yeah.
have a good night and leave. I don't know. Yeah, so that was a little bit odd to me.
Yeah, but maybe it was meant to be, for the movie, for the sake of the movie, like we were supposed to get mixed signals as the audience to not really know what could have
Yes.
happened had he just
Yes.
played it straight and been like, yeah, I like you, or if he had asked her out from the beginning. We don't know for certain what she would have said, but I don't know. I'm kind of leaning toward probably not. Also, the other thing was when Nikki becomes possessed and does fall in love with Bear and they're together, the friends kind of activate, and they're like, his like Bear's best friend, that guy's pulling him aside, like, what's going on here? This is kind of weird. Like, suddenly she's super into you. And their disbelief at this to me suggests like they probably knew, or maybe Nikki had told them like, yeah, Bear's a nice guy, but I wouldn't want to date him. So they're very confused by this. Whereas if they had been like, wow, great for you guys, I'm so happy for you, they would have, that would have maybe indicated that they understood that she liked him back. So
Right. Good point. Yes. Yeah. And then we learn later that she's actually sleeping with the other guy.
yeah,
Which
the
that
best friend.
I didn't know what the
Yeah.
point of that was. Yeah. Um,
Yeah. Well, is that? I guess that is like a common thing. I don't know how common it is now. I don't know, sex recession and everyone's lonely or whatever. But um, you know, fairly recently, that was like a common thing of groups of young people, sort of college or post college, all hanging out, and like friends kind of hook up and break up and rehook up, and sort of
oh no, for
'cause-
sure. I don't know. I mean,
yeah.
the other Bear was so much better looking than the other guy, so that's why I was just a little surprised.
Hmm.
Oh yeah,
But I
that's
mean,
so
I
true.
thought Bear was. Look,
Yeah.
I would totally go out with Bear. Sorry, I thought he was.
He wasn't
great.
too much of a wuss.
No, I thought he was very
Yeah.
cute, and
Mhm.
he did have a cat, and it was. I mean, he did have. I don't know. He did.
Well,
He felt bad that I know he something happened to the cat, but I don't know. Look,
he ate the
there
cat.
were the internal logic of the film was not entirely in place for me, but I
Hmm.
mean, it does. There is this fundamental question of whether who do we fall in love with, and who do we want to fall in love with us? Like, how valuable is it that we have the actual person? Like, you can, his wish is, I wish that Nikki loved me more than anyone else in the world. And I guess if he had framed it like, I wish she liked me back or something, like if it was milder, it would not have been, we would not have had mayhem ensue in quite this way. But was the message that if you want somebody to if you want to be the only person in the world to somebody, that is something you should re-examine.
Hmm.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I do think people are sometimes wrong about what they want. I think like there's like what people think they want and what they think they're looking for and what they're actually attracted to and what they, and those are not necessarily the same thing. And I think there is something about how people date now. Maybe it's particularly like apps and stuff that people are preoccupied more with like A, B, C, D, what they want, and there's these, but that's not necessarily what's gonna click for them or actually feel good, and they're surprised that they're actually attracted to or enjoying a relationship with someone that's maybe different from what they thought they would want.
Oh yeah.
It's like if there's a whole other experience of what your bodily, like how you touch each other, how your physical presence is, how you interact, like it's a different thing from, I don't know, I think the way that a lot of people think about what they're looking for.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I want to ask you guys about the psycho girlfriend trope, because this is a thing. You know, there's that famously overused quote. I think it was Margaret Atwood, something like, men are afraid that women are going to laugh at them, and women are afraid that men are going to kill them. It's just silly and reductive, and the kind of thing that ends up on, nevertheless, she persisted hashtag lists. But I always thought men are afraid that women are going to go completely psycho. How much of a concern is the crazy girl thing? Because it's also sexy, right? Like the crazy girl is also really hot, and she'd be like freaky in bed and all that. But how common of a concern is that, and how much of that is something that men talk about or embellish in their minds, like she's psychotic?
I mean, I'm reminded of something. I think Andrew and others have pointed this out, that what is it? Every man says his ex had borderline, and
Yeah.
every woman says her ex was a narcissist.
Yes.
And I think this film does have, so Nikki. There was a very interesting Substack post about this film by this woman, Ariel Lana, and she describes Nikki as like this kind of extreme, exaggerated, version of borderline personality disorder, she uses this phrase, and I actually don't know if this is a real term in the clinical literature, favorite person. She writes here, in the BPD, so borderline personality disorder community, there's a widely recognized concept called having a favorite person, someone to whom you attach yourself to the point it triggers and exacerbates the symptoms of your illness. In Obsession, Bear is Nikki's favorite person. She, and then she acts very sort of unhinged and can't, imagine being without him, to the point that she's like willing to hurt herself or him and other people, obviously, to keep him in her life. Have you heard this phrase, Andrew? Favorite person?
No, but
I don't know if this is like a TikTok thing or something that's
well,
that's real.
It definitely happens with borderline personality disorder. It's something I've done a lot with, but I think the idea is they flip on this person, so there's somebody who is the answer, and this is the perfect person, and this is what they've always needed, and somebody who totally gets them, and they jump to that conclusion way too fast, and then and hold on to it, and then it'll snap at some point when it's clear they're not that perfect, and then that's the worst person. How could they ever spend time with them? And it tends to look like that. My thought too, I wonder how much horror movies are actually like fantasies of what people want. I mean, I think the idea of a woman who's really crazy about you sounds great.
Not if she's standing in place waiting for you to come home from work and like, peeing on the floor because she can't move from that spot. I mean, unless that's your thing.
No, pee in the bathroom. That's preferable, but I think like it's something, and it works the other way too. I think that like obviously women are attract like Dracula and vampire stuff, and like actually I think like wasn't there a lot of like romance and erotic stuff? It's like pirates, vampires. It's all like horror movie figures are what women are reading to fantasize about, and maybe this is kind of similar where in some ways this is a fantasy. It's taken to pass the point of it a little bit, but it's kind of maybe less of a fear and more of a desire in some ways.
There's a really interesting book by this anthropologist, David Gilmour. The title is Misogyny, the Male Malady. And he writes about this, basically like this trope of misogyny, sort of cross-cultural survey, showing that, if you look at myths and folklore and stories that, of mermaids and sirens and these women who have this sort of connection with the underworld, and how, this sort of classic template of the brave explorer who goes out and then is sort of tempted by, the temptresses and the seductresses and these women who try to like pull him away from his path, and he's, so filled with lust for them, and they sort of capture his attention. And I wonder if that that sort of those stories are inspired by the sort of real phenomenon of men getting sort of sidetracked by by their own desires for women who are a little unhinged or a little sort of extreme in their personalities. And yeah, like but and I guess like the film did show this, right, where like, even after Nikki goes crazy, Bear does very little initially to like reverse it or get away from her or anything. There were so many things he could have done. You could have imagined a version of this film where, he calls the One Wish Willow hotline, or, remember he's like, how do I fix this? And they're like, there's no fixing it, bro. Like, you're just stuck in, for the rest of your life. And a version of this film could have been like, him tracking down the headquarters of this place and uncovering like what's going on here and like doing everything he can to rescue Nikki. But instead he's like, all right, well, I guess this is just it now. I'm living with this crazy woman, and she's like standing in the corner, like waiting for him to fall asleep to do God knows what. And he's just kind of, riding the wave until she starts, again, spoiler alert, like starts killing like members of their friend group and stuff, feeds him his own cat and like does other crazy things. And then he's like, oh yeah, maybe it's time to leave this life. So I kind of got like vulnerable narcissism from Bear. And what if you sense this, Andrew, of Bear being, like he has this fantasy of wanting Nikki, but he can't act on it. He has sort of this grandiose vision of what he could be with Nikki, but he's too fearful to actually do it. he seems like surprisingly perturbed when the friend group starts questioning them, like, hey, like, how come she's so in love with you? And he could have just said, like, I'm shocked, I'm just as shocked as you guys are, I don't know how this happened, but instead he's kind of like, what are you talking about? Like, of course we're in love. And so, yeah, I got a little bit of this sort of thin-skinned, vulnerable narcissism from him, and that does kind of align with a lot of the research on assortative mating, where people with kind of cluster B or dark triad traits tend to pair with each other. And so this, there's, this kind of trite, oversimplified thing of, if you think all of your exes have been narcissists, maybe you should look in the mirror, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, the way I think about narcissism is that everybody has a certain amount of narcissism, and it manifests differently, but it is kind of like a universal part of who we are. And I don't know that it's just basically like your efforts to preserve your self-esteem and like the ways that you go about trying to do that. And I think everybody does things to try to preserve their self-esteem, and that's like protecting yourself from criticism and sometimes avoiding things that are risky and sometimes maybe inflating yourself or trying to get positive attention or praise or things. I think those are normative, and but where it's if it becomes something that's really taking over your personality, where it's more severe distortions, really impairing functioning, really impairing relationships is it. So I mean, the vulnerable narcissist is really like avoiding anything that might be a threat to his self-esteem, and really hiding from the world in a way that's like, and secretly, usually the vulnerable narcissist type prototype is somebody who secretly, when they're in their basement, is like they're a hidden genius. They think they're like incredible, but they don't want to kind of share that or have that be exposed. So that's part of why they.
Okay, so everyone on Twitter is what you're saying. Yeah.
There's a lot of, I mean, the
anonymous accounts on Twitter.
There was like a psychoanalytic model, and it was basically there's 4 psychological drives, and it's like sex, aggression, narcissism, and masochism. And the masochistic piece is like kind of like the regulating piece. It kind of keeps your desires in check, and it kind of keeps your ego in check. And there is this kind of like innate self-checking force that's like the.
Is that related to Freud's death drive, or is that?
Yeah. Kind of. It's like, yeah, it's the part that's kind of like regulating, negating, kind of like, and sometimes people really do have anxiety about expressing desires sometimes. I mean, I think that's part of the anxiety of asking somebody out is you have to kind of, you're letting a desire be felt that you have to tolerate, and that can be hard in itself.
What do you guys think of? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Rob. And then
I was just going to say that. Well, you see this in Bear, that he's given an opportunity to tell Nikki before she's possessed, whether he likes her, and then later, he still was unable to tell her. She forces him to say "I love you." Remember, she's like he's sitting on the couch, and she's like screaming over him, saying like, "Tell me you love me, tell me you love me." And then under duress, he reluctantly screams back, "Okay, I love you." And so, even under those conditions, he doesn't really want to reveal how he feels about her. Although in that moment, I guess you could argue that he's confused, because he likes the real Nikki, but he couldn't tell her that. But yeah, that I felt that whole thing was interesting, where he needed her to tell him first that she liked him before he could tell her, and sort of reciprocate those feelings. And even that creepy scene where the possessed Nikki is asleep, and then the real Nikki is like saying like, "Kill me, Bear, kill me." Like she's she's being coerced by this possession, and she doesn't like the way that she's living her life, and probably doesn't like Bear, that she's asking Bear to kill her, and he doesn't give her what she wants.
They did have a honeymoon period, though, right? Because there's the perfunctory montage scene early on after she goes under the spell. And so we see them cooking breakfast and,
Oh, yeah,
canoodling
yeah.
and laughing, and it's like
Mm.
it's almost a parody of those romantic comedy montage falling in love sequences. But I wasn't quite sure like how much time that was supposed to represent, if it was just a joke, if the film was making a joke. But
Right.
it seems like
Mm.
they he did have a kind of fun time with her initially before she turned the corner.
I guess that is part of that, like, dating a crazy girl trope, or the like manic pixie dream girl, borderline girl of, yeah, the beginning's always fun, and then before the check comes due.
Have
I
you? Oh no, go ahead.
I think there's also something that's I was thinking about too, about like, which people talk about it being as kind of in a way it's a cliche that like falling in love is kind of like there's feelings of craziness with it. And I mean the most common is just typically the there's a often like a really grandiose idealization of somebody, and that's very gratifying, and it doesn't last, and that's so there's like this kind of like crazy infatuation and need and emotional instability and hypersensitivity that happens, and this idealization of this other person. And I think it's actually like, as that what's hard for couples is as they come back down to baseline, managing the connection and being able to manage a relationship that changes in character over time. Like a
Yeah.
long-term relationship, it's going to take all these different stages, and at each kind of stage, from like the honeymoon period to like the longer term period to maybe like a commitment or children or your kids get older or whatever, health problems or the kind of things that happen, like each thing the couple has to pivot, and it's a different type of connection. And but I think part of like, this is not, a perfect person. It's like that's like when things kind of slip.
And how do you know if it's just a normal stage in the relationship, or you're like, oh yeah, actually, we had fun in the beginning, and then we realized we weren't compatible, and it's tough to be able to tell the difference. I guess that's why people go to therapy.
And there's not a huge sample size, because it's like, how many long-term relationships can you feasibly have in your life? And you also don't know if it's your thing. I think a lot of people, there's a maybe heightened intimacy of when you really know someone, and I think some people run from that. The initial part is maybe less threatening, and then when like a real attachment and vulnerability and intimacy emerges later, that can be really threatening. But if that's active, you're likely to say, oh, I just think it was, we weren't right for each other,
Right.
so it's like it's hard to even know what's in your head.
Yeah.
Well,
I
there's
mean,
like the initial part of every sort of sexual relationship, the sex is always most exciting in the beginning, and then it kind of levels out. But then the same is true for kind of intimacy in general, where when you meet someone who you're attracted to and you start dating, the person initially always seems endlessly fascinating. You've never heard their stories, you know nothing about their past, their
Right.
relationships, their thoughts, their opinions, their preferences, their likes and dislikes. And you think of this person as just this reservoir of endless curiosities and endless intrigue. And then after you date them for however long it might be, 6 months, a year, or longer, even the most interesting person, they have a limited supply of stories and interests and
yeah.
thoughts, and you've eventually heard everything that they've had to say. You've heard the highlights. And I think a lot of people can mistakenly think like, oh, maybe I'm not interested in this person after all, when all you've done is just sort of suck them dry of every interesting thing that they could possibly say. And then you just, okay, well, it's time to find the next interesting person. Maybe there's someone else more interesting out there, not understanding that process of, once the sex levels out, the kind of intimacy in general levels out, the conversations and everything, that that's often when the real work has to begin, of if you want a relationship to endure beyond the kind of initial excitement that accompanies those early stages.
Yeah,
There's
and you like what they see about you, right? I mean, you're telling
Right,
your
right.
stories are all new to them, and
Yes, yeah, they're
part of falling in
laughing,
love
and
with somebody is you like who you are in their presence. And so, if the
mm,
longer you can hide the stuff you don't like about yourself, the more enjoyment you get out of that relationship. But at some point, they're going to see the stuff you don't like about yourself, and then then what are you going to
yeah,
do?
yeah.
I think there is kind of like a model. There was like a model of like the developmental cycle of a relationship, and kind of a core point maybe around 5 to 7 or 8 years into a relationship, something around there. The longer term, maybe more for like people that tend to get married or have those longer term relationships. There's this period of individuation, was what it was called, where you kind of like start to tolerate the two of you being individual, separate people. Maybe it's as early, or maybe for some people it's 3 years or something. But you're not just a couple. Like you're very merged early. Like I think people like, or you get the relationship established, and there's kind of like a very merged presence for a period, and then you kind of individuate, and people change. They like, they get different interests. Their views change. Their experiences change. They switch careers. They like new things, and there's lots of places for the two people to diverge, and that period of individuation is like one of the challenging points of like, okay, we're still in a relationship, but we're two like more independent individuals, as opposed to this couple where we're super close and idealizing each other, and that isn't sustainable for very long.
That's why it's hard as you get older. I mean, I think this is an argument for pairing up fairly young. The conventional wisdom used to be you need to know who you are first before you form a committed relationship with somebody, get married, whatever. But I mean, and obviously there's truth to that. You don't want to get married when you're 17, but you want to grow with the person. And if you're so established and you're so set in your ways, it's going to be tough, right?
Well, there is like, people get married at these like particular ages. Like it's just like the data are just like so clear that there's a particular time, and it's not unusual that like you'll have a friend group and everybody gets married within a few years of each other. And it might be that those are good times. But one of the theories about why marriages are ending so much more frequently is just that people are living a lot longer. It is really crazy to think about living to be 80. You're both going to live to be 85 and settle down when you're 25, and that's a long time to like grow apart. And I think
are
it's
marriages
incredible.
are marriages really ending more often? I thought divorce rates were down.
Oh, well, maybe from like a decade ago or something, but like, I mean, from like 100 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And but people didn't live nearly as long. Like it's like when life expectancy's 50, getting married at 25 is like, okay,
Oh yeah, not a big commitment. I could sign
exactly.
up for that. Yeah, I could handle that.
25-year
Yeah.
cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah,
25
like if somebody
years
has a
you'll be dead.
if somebody has a terminal illness, they're going to attract like real fear of commitment people. So that could be.
Oh
a big match,
yeah.
right.
You can have the full relationship in just for a couple
Just
years.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Did you guys ever see the show Crazy Ex-Girlfriend? Do you know this show?
I've heard of it,
It's
but
I've heard
so
of it. I don't know.
good.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's
Really?
brilliant. Oh my gosh. Rachel Bloom is a genius. It went many, many seasons. I know it sounds weird because there's like musical numbers in it, and I know that sounds totally cringe, but trust me, it is so good. And it's about all these issues. It's about mental illness. I think the main character, I don't know if she's borderline. I don't know exactly what her diagnosis is, but it's just an incredibly nuanced and just thoughtful and pre-woke kind of treatment of communities and people and craziness and male-female dynamics, and it's just so good. So
What's
you
it
ever
say
haven't-
about what's it saying about?
it doesn't really have a message. I mean, that's the thing. I think when did it run? I mean, it must have been kind of mid 2010s or early even 2010. No, it's just it's the premise is this girl. She's a very high powered Harvard law educated lawyer living in New York City, very high achieving, but she's crazy with men and does not do dating well. And she runs into this random guy on the street who was her boyfriend in summer camp, like, when she was a kid, and she gets fixated on him. I mean, it's all about her fixations, irrational fixations. And he lives in West Covina, California, okay, which is like this, this kind of grubby suburb of Los Angeles, like 2 hours from the beach or something. And she gets it in her mind that she is going to just go move to West Covina and get a law job, not because she, wants to be with this guy, but because she just wants a change and she's going to move to West Covina. So it's all about her obsession with this guy who's actually like incredibly boring, and they just have a lot of fun with this. But it's about your mind getting wrapped up into things. It's about her particular neuroses, but it's done in this incredibly hilarious and smart way, and she's so good. Anyway, I can't recommend it enough.
I am so interested in what catches people and sucks them into a relationship. I remember this was in Mad Men. Don, for people who well saw this, John marries his secretary, I guess, Megan.
Yes, he married somebody named Megan, who, by the way, would never be named Megan in that time and place. Like, it's like the 60s, and she's from Montreal. The name makes no sense, by the way. They get everything else in that show perfect, and then they just like drop the ball with Megan. Anyway, sorry.
You would know about when and where things are.
It's like, why don't you just name her like Jennifer or something? That's not, people were not named that back then. Anyway, okay.
But what happens, at least the way it's kind of portrayed in the show, is like he's with his kids. She's accompanying him on this trip with his kids, and they're at a restaurant, and one of the kids knocks over a milkshake and makes a big mess. And she's like, and he's like, oh, he's irritated and whatever. And she's like, it's okay, we got it, and just helps clean up the milkshake, and then they get it away and they get another one. And like, but she just like has this kind of like comfort and mastery in that. And he just kind of like looks at her, and that interaction just sparked something where you can kind of imagine his previous wife, Betty, being cold or entitled in that moment.
Give me another cigarette, and I'm
just like, I hate you kids.
Put my cigarette out in your milkshake.
And be irritated and kind of cold and not helpful. And this is somebody, and so it just hits that chord that sucks him in. And I do think people have that, where they see one thing, it's like and they think, oh, this is somebody who is helpful or positive or independent, or or they've got a big friend group, or they don't care about friends or whatever, and it grabs them.
They infer things that they over infer from those isolated cases. Like I remember that scene you're talking about. Isn't Don like paying her to be the nanny or whatever during that trip?
He totally idealizes her. Right,
exactly. Of course, like if you're getting paid to watch the kids and they spill something, you're gonna be like, all right, it's fine. Like, I'm getting paid to do this. Like, this is my job. And of course, he's her boss, and so she's not going to be mad that one of his kids does something wrong. She's going to take it in stride. But in his mind, it's like, oh wow, this is an angel.
Yeah, that's what was so great about that scene, is he's so naive in that moment, and like he is so damaged in terms of his relationships with women. No, the whole Megan idealization, like just the way they had her. I mean, I think you feel like the creator of the show, is it Matt Weinstein? Matt Weiner. He himself was like very fixated on that actress, I think, clearly, and just the way he has her dressed. I mean, she's so over the top beautiful, and her clothes are just always perfect. And Dawn kind of superficially falls for that initially, but then she becomes this like huge narcissist, right? Like, sucking all the air out of the room at their dinner parties and doing little dances and songs and trying to she's trying to be a movie star. Like, she wants to be an actress or something, right?
Yeah, they're clearly not right for each other. But I'm much more sympathetic to him falling for her, because I think people get sucked in by these irrational things and they don't have control over it.
Of course, no, we all do. Yeah.
We got to do an episode on Mad Men one of these days.
Oh my gosh.
A very psychoanalytic show. Tons of psychoanalysis in that show. And really driven by it. And I think really informed. I think that show was really shaped by Century of the Self. Do people watch the Adam Curtis documentaries, Century of the Self, which the aesthetic of those documentaries seems totally just transplanted into Mad Men.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Have you seen those?
No.
Megan?
No.
Oh, they're really good. I mean, they're a summary of basically Freud and psychoanalytic influence over the 20th century. BBC documentary, very opinionated, but narrated it by the BBC in a way that makes it seem authoritative. They're really kind of like personal essays rather than like histories, but it can read, if you're not careful, you can kind of think it's an impartial history. I don't think you'd think that, Megan, but I think some people viewing it will.
Okay. Oh, sounds great. I will check that out. All right. Well, I think we've covered Obsession. I don't know if we've spoiled everything. So hopefully they've made $158 million or 100.
They don't need any more.
So they don't need any more money from the film.
Yeah.
So it's okay if we spoil it. So, all right. Well, thank you both. Great
Thanks, Megan.
conversation. All right.
Thanks, Megan.
See you next time.